So I'm going to introduce, let's see, this is Andy Carluccio, and Andy Carluccio is head of engineering, event engineering for Zoom. And I know that we have only 15 minutes, so we're just going to dive right into this.
Sounds good.
So how did you get into event engineering, over the Zoom platform?
Yeah, so think back to March 2020 and the advent of the pandemic. My background is in computer science and theater, so I've always had an intersectional background, how technology informs art and how art informs technology. So when COVID hit, I was laid off from my job, and more importantly, all my friends and colleagues in the entertainment industry were also out because we closed our venues to the world to keep our community safe, right? And so the question became, how do we migrate performance from the stage to the screen? And so I started evaluating different platforms, teleconferencing platforms, remote contribution platforms. And what landed me on Zoom was really three main elements. It was the ease of onboarding, how to get a guest in there. People generally figuring out how to get into a Zoom call. It was the quality of the video with the consideration of the latency at the same time, a really powerful union there. But third, and the thing that kept us the most was the SDKs. So as a developer, I was able to sit in rehearsal rooms and build real production solutions for real events using Zoom's developer platform. So if we needed a certain feature here or there, we needed to modify a client this way, we could make that modification. So really out of pure necessity, not out of any sort of grand plan, but out of necessity, I created a company called Liminal.
And at the beginning, you're just doing your own events, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we were basically a production company. We would show up for clients, theater, academic theater, the local church, the school up the street, right? And we'd be helping them produce events on Zoom by building customized tools with the SDK. But really, we were a production company up until really January of 2021, when we realized that the tool set that we were building could actually be generalized to solve general event needs on the platform. You have to think back, this is before Zoom events. This is really when Zoom was focused on the education market, enterprise communications market, right? And certainly those are still important focuses, but this was prior to all that. So Liminal was really bringing Zoom into that market segment. And that's where we generalized the software production, took a more conventional software startup route, and created tools to help integrate the Zoom platform into traditional broadcast architecture, control infrastructure, things like that.
Well, and this is how we met. This is how I met Andy, was that I think you just showed, I think a bunch of us, this thing, again, as I said earlier, is Office Hours Global, where we just all get together every morning and talk about events, virtual events and digital events. And we have people from broadcast and everything else that trade notes every morning. And so this thing about Liminal started coming up, everyone started to see it, and we kind of move like a pack. So when one person mentions it, suddenly 100 people show up at somebody's website. And I think that's what you saw was just a...
Yeah, I was looking at the download forums. I'm like, who are all these people?
So anyway, so Andy just we didn't even know who he was. I think we were but we were literally talking about OSC, and talk a little bit about what the products actually do.
Yeah, so we created two software products at Liminal. Zoom OSC, which uses open sound control, which is a standard for control communication, software to software, hardware to software, et cetera. So we allowed Zoom to communicate with the open sound control protocol by defining a system for media servers or control equipment to be a stream deck, all that kind of stuff to talk to Zoom. And then Zoom ISO gives you the individual video and audio feeds from Zoom. So if you want ISO NDI outputs, you want to go to a Blackmagic deck link card, you want to go to Dante, this is how you get the individual stems out of Zoom.
And to give you an example, the show that we do every morning, this Office Hours Global, we have 5 Mac Minis, little M1s, the cheapest $699 or $599 now Mac Minis. Each one of them is pulling 4 ISO tracks out of Zoom. So it goes and grabs 20 people and sends them into an ATEM switcher, into the constellation. We can also grab all the audio via Dante and send that out to a mixer. Those are then sent in, and what happens is Zoom OSC is actually not only talking through a program called Isadora, is not only talking to the ingests, but it's also talking to the switcher, it's talking to everything downstream. So literally, it goes in. Now, we have a question system that we use. People ask questions, raise their hand, and literally when we push a button that says super source, it auto-fills the super source with the people that were set up to answer the question, and all of that's running with a mixture of Zoom OSC and Zoom ISO.
That's right, and with our latest version of ISO, we can now get 8 outputs from a Mac Mini, which is great. And then if you go to the Mac Studio, you get 16 outputs from a single computer to SDI. So
and a 1080p.
At 1080p, 30 FPS. Yep.
So you got to move forward a little bit. You got acquired by Zoom. How did that happen?
Yeah. So like I said, if you think back to Zoom prior to sort of its latest iteration, when it was really focused again on education and enterprise comms, Liminal was really bringing Zoom into the production market. And so we had a very tight relationship with the developer platform team. We were talking about the SDKs. What can we do to improve? This is the kind of access we need. These are the kind of tools that we need. And when Zoom launched Zoom Events and launched Zoom Apps, there was a lot of strategic alignment between Liminal and Zoom. So in late December 2021, Zoom completed an asset purchase of Liminal. Myself and my co-founder, Jonathan Cocatello, joined Zoom. So now I lead our event and broadcast initiatives, and Jonathan leads our services side.
And how do you approach development inside of Zoom for the tools?
Absolutely. So we're really here to be the advocates inside of Zoom for the broadcast industry. So we really believe in being with the users, being in the production rooms, learning from our customers directly about what the emergent workflows are. This is why we go to things like this and learn more about emergent workflows and how we can be on top of that. It's really been a massive accelerator for us, though. I mean, being inside of Zoom, we can now say, when we want to add a feature, not only do we add it to our product, we actually start by adding it to our developer platform so that other people can follow the same journey that we followed, where they can go to the developer platform and have the tool sets that they need to be able to have custom bespoke integrations into our platform. So when I want to add a feature to Zoom ISO, for example, I actually start by adding it to our third-party SDKs. And then I build Zoom ISO against our third-party SDKs. So we're using our own technology to make sure that it's battle-ready for anybody to be able to build an integration at this level.
Where's the tool set right now?
I think, again, the key right now, a lot of focus is on integrations. How are we compatible with existing broadcast workflows? How are we able to get Zoom to basically act like a gateway where you can bring a bunch of stuff into it and transport it anywhere in the world really fast? And how can we get a bunch of stuff out of it in really high quality and into the standards that we use for broadcast and production? And I think the tool set's becoming extremely robust. There's this really interesting convergence right now between Blackmagic, Apple, and Zoom, where we can get a really, really high density contribution system that used to cost, like $8,000 for 4 outputs, and now for under $5,000 we can do 16. It's the performance situation that we're in right now is really a paradigm shift across the industry.
I used to own 4 Skype TX boxes, or 6 Skype TX with 24 inputs. Not that I'm bitter. So now I have a little Mac Mini that does the same thing. So where do you see it going? Like, what are you focused on this year?
Again, I think a lot of our focus right now, I think, needs to be on thought leadership. I think that we need bold and decisive thinking in event planning in order to be able to take the shift that COVID sort of put on our plate. I think that, like you said before, it really resonated with me that when you have an in-person event and you don't include an online audience, you're excluding 99.99999% of the addressable market. And I think, we have to keep that in mind when we're planning something, that sometimes in-person just isn't good enough for our total market goals. But I also think that hybrid also has its own risk associated with it. I think there was a great discussion leading up to this about those considerations. And I think that we need bold and original planning and how to make an equitable experience for everybody. As a theater maker, I really believe that my job is to help you feel something that I'm feeling, or think something that I'm thinking, or experience something that I'm experiencing, right? And I believe that that's a core fundamental of events, generally speaking. So I'm excited for a future where a global audience could be communicating at an empathetic level, right, where we can understand each other at our core, and that events and the online infrastructure that we're all building can actually help improve real human-to-human connection across geographic regions. So I think that's got to be our focus right now, is how do we include the rest of the world and communicate as humans to each other really deeply and complexly. And I believe that production tools are the key to making that experience feel like a mirror or a piece of glass that we're looking through versus an artificial experience.
Where do you see the biggest challenges right now for you?
Again, I do think a lot of it is in thought leadership, and I think that there's a lot of clinging to traditional models because they've served us well for, for centuries, really, if you think about it, right? But now we're in the digital age, right? And we really need a lot of leadership in defining what events are in the digital age. It's not something that we can just turn a blind eye to or say we're just going to shut it off, right? It's here. It's a reality. The customers are demanding it. The brands need to be serving that, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that we saw that progression, when we went from stage to film, there's a lot of things that had to change. When we went from silent to talkies, there were things that just didn't work anymore. And when we moved to those things, and there's people that will always, when we went from BlackBerry to iPhone, the BlackBerry looked great and everyone was really attached to it, and some hung on to it for another couple of years, but eventually a more flexible, more scalable platform is going to end up, the choice.
Absolutely, and I think that the paradigm shift right now is interactivity, because that's what we've always struggled with, right, for global audiences, how to have that seamless, low latency experience. But we're entering into the chapter of interactivity in scaled events, truly global conversations, right, where we can include everybody and let them feel like they have a vested personal interests, not only in attending, but in actually crafting the event. So it sort of takes a certain level of humility or a certain platform leveling to bring the audience in and actually engage and let them craft what the experience is. And we're finding that that's very successful for brands at scale.
Are there any events right now that you're watching that you go, wow, I want to, that's inspiring, or that's showing us a glimmer of what the future is?
Well, I think that there's a couple of different form factors that are super interesting. A good example of an archetype of event, right, would be like the Super Bowl, for example. There are people who go there and they have a really good time, but the majority of the audience is online, and they're also or watching on television or through distributed and produced media, and they're also having a really high quality experience. But they're there for different reasons, right? Like, you don't show up to the Super Bowl to get a really close look at what's happening on the field, right? You're going to be way in the back, right? But there's something tangible about that experience, and I really appreciate the digital first model because it gives us the ability to co-locate with each other, but also to have the scalability of truly global interaction, right?
Yeah, and I think that the numbers that we're going to start talking about, especially my eyes kind of rolled back with the Tony Robbins one.
Yeah.
It just in my office hours community, it just kind of rolled through like fire. Like, he's doing an event for 1 million people, and that's the beginning. Like, these events of 500 or 5,000 or 50,000 are going to be these tiny little cute events, where when we're going to be starting to, I think we're on the verge of, I think we'll see a 10 million, like once we get to 1 million, we're going to see 10 million people in an event inside of the next 18 months.
The audience is there. It's just a matter of reaching them, right?
Yeah, but it's not, but we have to figure out how to do that, efficiently.
Right. Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we're going to hand it off.
It's not yours. Take it.